The question is, how do you love your American self right now from the perspective of an American? That is a great question because it is so easy and I would say accurate to recognize that we are the evil empire in this world that is exploiting the global south, the Middle East, etc. And it is important to recognize our complicity in the system that is bringing actual harm, not just to the people, but also the planet itself. And we are just absolutely decimating the natural resources that this beautiful earth has provided us. Now, how do we love our American self? I think that the question itself, if we break that down, we'll find the answer. It is to stop identifying as an American. And now, this does not mean to brush aside our complicity in the system, but the nationalist concept, the patriotism of being proud Americans, which a lot of us were raised to align with, I certainly was, here in the heartland of the imperial regime in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it is a red state. I was raised in evangelical Christianity. I was told how lucky I was to live in God's country because that meant I was free, right? And then later you grow up and you realize that not everyone is the same level of free. Do you know what I mean? And no one's free until we're all free, right? So there is a recognition that it is important to hold simultaneously. And it is the recognition that we are complicit in the system, that we do have a responsibility with our privilege as Americans, particularly white Americans, for myself, to speak truth to power, to hold people in power accountable for this system that is absolutely devastating this world. And there's a lot of work that we have to do. Our feelings are valid. And I do think this is important because even in recognizing our privilege, if we don't validate our internal feelings and our guilt and our shame for being American citizens in the empire that's harming this planet, if we don't hold space for those feelings just on a fucking strategic level, okay? If we don't hold space for those feelings and validate them, they will come out in repressed and unhealthy ways because you can't hide your feelings. They will still manifest in whatever ways they can. So if you don't give them appropriate expression, our anger, our pain, our guilt, our fear, all of that, if we don't give it healthy expression, it will still manifest perhaps in stress in your body, perhaps externally in violence towards others in some way, shape, or form. That is why it is important to recognize those feelings in the first place. So I would say that how do you love your American self as an American? Recognizing that being an American is not something to be proud of. I think the answer is to start with checking in with our feelings, validating them so that they don't continue harm, right? We've also talked about on this platform, and it was a Black creator that I first saw this concept talked about online, and then I saw it from another creator who talked about the same thing, and it is this concept of like the white supremacist aspect of hierarchy on this planet, the white supremacist aspect that has gone out and dominated via colonialism and imperialism across this planet actually can be really identified as an internal lack of meaning and connection to the indigenous lands that we originate from in Europe, and on a communal level, right, on a horizontal connectivity level, which is to say it's almost like a spiritual crisis. Even though I'm an atheist, I like the word spiritual crisis does the job of talking about what I'm trying to explain. So there is a very isolating and individualized aspect of being even in the heart of the empire that I actually do think is valid to work through and process, because in order to break out of like the individualist and capitalist paradigm and start doing the work to better this world and leave it better than we found it, I actually do think there's a lot of internal transformative processes that are important to address in order to be there for others. A very, very oversimplified way of saying this is put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. I do think a lot of people can use that phrase to just never actually get to the point where they're helping others. So I do think it's important to be cognizant of that. But I digress. So to answer the question, how do you love your American self as an American who recognizes that America is the evil empire? I think that like doing some of the internal emotional work of healing from the trauma that was handed down to us by the same system we benefit from is an important first step. That is why we talk about deconstruction of all of these different hierarchies. We talk about deconstructing patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, and organized religion, right? Deconstruction is a very big part of that. But then I very much try to emphasize the importance of rebuilding and reconnecting with the self, reconnecting with the community, reconnecting with nature, all of these more spiritual aspects of the human experience, right? So that's the next step. And then I would say the final, not the final, like this is not a, 3-step process that we can just follow and liberate the entire, I mean, maybe it is, I don't know. But the question itself is to stop identifying as an American, not to suggest that we just ignore the privilege that comes with being, our responsibility to use being an American to take down America, if that makes sense. Not that I'm trying to take down America. The recognition that identifying as a national citizen is inherently propping up said system. Yeah, I hope that's a good enough answer. I don't have all of the answers, but I daily, we're all dealing with, all of us who are aware are dealing with the guilt and the shame of being American. And I think that is totally, totally valid. And it's important to recognize and honor those feelings so they don't manifest in an unhealthy way, and then kind of recognize that, we are not the empire. We are not. Like, that's kind of a paradox because obviously all of us collectively together do live in the empire, but I think it's important to stop identifying as an American in the sense of being patriotic or nationalistic, etc. Does that make sense? I hope I answered that well, but I think that's a very good question.